morning.
I would like to call to order the April 10th, 2019 meeting of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery. Secretary, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Miller will not be here today. Ms. Alvarez-Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Chairman Irvine?
Yes,
We have a quorum of the committee with 3 members present.
thank you. The committee will review 2 presentations today, both by Mike Connolly, our Chief Planning Officer, and the first is going to be a presentation on the Halsted Street Bus and Bike Lane Pilot.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer. We wanted to provide you with an update on a recently completed pilot operation of a combined bus and bike lane on Halsted Street during a bridge closure which sent our Chicago Avenue bus route, Route 66, on a half-mile detour. The Bascule Bridge on Chicago Avenue required replacement by CDOT. That meant that the complete closure of Chicago Avenue needed to be implemented for several months at the river there. For 3.5 months, the bridge would be closed. You can see it in the bottom right-hand corner, that row of X's is the part of Chicago Avenue that was closed in this picture. CTA and CDOT worked together to create a pilot bus bike lane on the detour to facilitate the movement of CTA buses. A bike lane already existed on Halsted Street, north and south, and some street parking was removed to accommodate the 14-foot bus bike lane on Halsted in both directions between Chicago Avenue and Division Street to the north. A bus-only left turn lane was created from Chicago Avenue onto northbound Halsted Street, and exclusive lanes were set up with traffic bollards and extensive signage to indicate the bus-bike-only lanes. Staff from CTA, CDOT, the Chicago Police Department, and the Chicago Department of Revenue were on site for the first several weeks to control traffic and enforce the operation of the lanes. The results were very successful, and the CTA bus operation was helped considerably by the bus-bike lanes that were put in place. Both the Chicago Avenue bus, which was operating on a detour, and the regular Halsted route buses benefited from those lanes. The dedicated bus-only left turn lane from Chicago Avenue, it's in blue at the bottom of these slides. That turn lane resulted for eastbound operation was 65% faster for the buses than the general traffic in the AM peak. The southbound bike bus lane from Division to Chicago for the Halsted bus and the Chicago buses saved 35% over regular traffic during that 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. period. That's the red sequence on here. And the northbound segment from Chicago to Division during the PM rush saved over 50% ahead of the regular traffic in operation on there. In this next photograph, the set of photographs here, you can see both the northbound operation there. You can see the bus in the east side of Halsted Street, inside of what are called delineators, those little plastic reflective bollards that are screwed into a bracket in the base of the street pavement to indicate the division between general traffic. The operation of that lane allowed the buses to bypass the heavy traffic that was in existence there during both PM and AM rushes. The general traffic showed significant compliance, although there was some learning curve during the early days of operation. We straightened that out, helped by the Chicago Police Department, who were our partners on this. We did a customer survey and sent out some email surveys to our Venture Card customers who would be using this route. We got a very, very positive response from them. The customers felt like it was a great advantage for them. They could see the fact that they were passing up the general traffic and the bus was moving more quickly there. And folks really liked the experience and suggested to us that we need to make this more widespread if we possibly could. We wrapped up with over 1,500 complete responses from our customers on this, and as I say, very, very positive for our customers. We did survey our bus operators to see how they felt about it, both with some email surveys, as well as we did visits to the garage where these buses were based. They have monthly wrap sessions at the garage where the operators come in and talk about their problems and what they're seeing on the street. We staffed those and got feedback from them as well. But very positive response from our bus operators on this as well. And through the help of CDOT, we reached out to the Active Transportation Alliance and conducted a survey of cyclists who were operating in this area. Again, very, very positive. The cyclists felt safe. They didn't feel constrained by the buses being in the lane with them. They felt the delineators, which hadn't been there along the bike. There was a bike lane there, but it didn't have those little plastic delineators. They felt that made it more safe for the bicyclists in the operation. Just a kind of a summation here, lessons learned. We basically saw that this was a good thing. CDOT did not see a Carmageddon. We didn't see traffic crashing around us and creating problems. This certainly helped the buses keep on schedule and helped us when the detour was there. A longer distance may make a difference. This was only a half a mile from Division to Chicago Avenue. And it was also a winter time. This took place over the winter, so it's a low time for bicycling. So it might be different when we see heavier bicycle traffic in this as well. But overall, it worked out very well. We had to talk the snowplows into going into the lane at first. They were unfamiliar with it, and they were saying, no, we can't go in there. And we said, yeah, go, you guys can go in there. And we sent them in. They cleaned up the snow, and it worked out very, very well for the time. And then beyond this, the next steps are for us to continue to work with CDOT. We're identifying other opportunities across the city to do pilots. This one was a pilot done during a construction project, but we feel that there are applications that can be piloted in other locations in the city to give buses an advantage and to get people used to the idea that the buses, which are carrying a huge load of people, should be given some priority in street and have the cars wait in line. So that's sort of our feedback and our next steps on this. We're working with CDOT on this to identify locations for the next pilots as we go forward. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you and try to answer questions.
Thank you, Mike. That's fantastic. It's really, you anticipate all my questions with your report and presentation, and I'm glad you're looking for more opportunities to try this out. So I don't have any questions.
Yeah, Mike, when do you think you would have some proposed other routes?
We're hoping to do something later this year, and we've been working with CDOT and meeting with them and talking about specific locations, sitting down with the map and looking at the constraints, where there are existing bike lanes, where there are locations where buses and bikes could coexist safely and go in, and where we'd see the advantage, because that's part of it too, is figuring out a section where it would help us. There are parts of Halsted Street that we think would be helpful to look at a little bit further south of this location.
Any other questions?
No, it just seems like the bus drivers and we're comfortable with the cyclists on the side.
They operate in several areas with cyclists in and out of the bus areas already. And so it was just a matter of additional caution and having the bus drivers be aware of it. And we really had no problems with it at all.
It's great.
Did your bus operators have any suggestions for other areas where this might work?
They have several suggestions, and we're working through those with the CDOT folks. So, yes.
Thank you. So the next presentation will be on the City of Chicago Mobility Task Force report.
Again, Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer. This morning, we're going to share with you some information about the recently completed Mobility Task Force report. You should have a copy. I think we're distributing copies to the board members of this report. The Mayor Emanuel convened the Mobility Task Force in September of last year to create a forward-looking and innovative roadmap for the future of mobility and transportation in Chicago. The task force was led by Ray LaHood, the former Secretary of U.S. DOT, and was comprised primarily of industry leaders, including our own President Carter, City Commissioners Rebecca Scheinfeld, Karen Tamley, and Rosa Escareno, as well as representatives from nonprofits, civic groups, academia, and the private industry. The task force met 6 times between October and February. There were sessions on existing public data, existing public transit, new mobility technologies and providers, future trends, and a session focused primarily on accessibility, livability, sustainability, and equity for the future. The task force included academics and representatives from the private sector, private labs from Argonne National Labs, civic groups, and community leaders from small and medium-sized community groups. Researchers were included, as well as practitioners involved, including the executive director of our MPO, our Metropolitan Planning Organization. We heard again and again the desire for new modes coming in to be complementary to transit, to serve as a first mile, last mile need, or to allow for reduced car ownership by the citizens of Chicago. At the same time, we know that this aspiration can be difficult in a place like Chicago, which already has a robust grid of bus service and a strong rail network. In fact, we know that a significant portion of the ride-hailing trips are directly competing with transit and originate in the Loop or other areas with strong transit presence. Many ride-hailing trips are even taken during peak times when transit service is most frequent and available. With that in mind, the task force thought it was important to keep the public benefit of transportation system as a whole clearly in mind as the group prepared to make its specific policy recommendations. The task force began, therefore, by identifying underlying principles that would inform all of the recommendations and against which those recommendations could be evaluated. These principles were in turn informed by the risks that the task force members and their staffs identified. Things like the lack of stable and sufficient funding for public transportation, or decreasing transit ridership and the rise of lower capacity, lower efficiency trips through extra ride hailing. At the same time, the need to aggressively reduce carbon emissions through a shift to low carbon mobility options was examined. They also identified accessibility in transportation as a key need, as well as the need for new data sharing arrangements with the availability of new data. And they identified, too, a lack of clear existing principles to guide implementation of these new transportation options that are coming to the fore. The principles that were outlined insist that we make public benefit primary in the development of new policies going forward. The recommendations which came out of the task force themselves were grouped into categories based on overarching goals. There were, in fact, over 50 individual recommendations representing a broad swath of input and subject areas. Key among them were recommendations to encourage reduced dependency on single-occupant vehicle trips and the increased use of higher efficiency options. The need to build and maintain an accessible and affordable transportation system and to support investments in transportation infrastructure are also critical for CTA. As well, the report includes recommendations to help prepare the city to utilize and protect the additional data that will be available and to learn about and better understand the needs of future mobility options like connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles as they approach. You have a copy of the report, but I wanted to highlight a couple of the recommendations that are very significant, particularly for CTA. Specifically, the recommendations related to bus priority call for investments in street infrastructure to increase the speed and reliability of CTA bus routes. This suggests additional implementation of solutions like dedicated bus lanes, transit signal priority, queue jumps, and raised boarding platforms to improve service. CTA and CDOT are pursuing investments as a part of the Bus Priority Zone project. The work this year, in 2019, focuses on 79th Street and on Chicago Avenue. The report recommends that CTA continue to study ways to speed up boarding and look at ways to make that scalable while protecting CTA from revenue loss due to fare evasion. This recommendation also calls for the careful and intentional rollout of bus lane enforcement using cameras by pursuing state-enabling legislation. This is something that will help ensure that we get the most value out of the bus priority investments when they're made, while also ensuring that the penalties are fair and reasonably applied. In recommendation 5.1, the report calls for continued investments in accessible and affordable transportation services. The recommendations acknowledge the importance of CTA's system to preserving existing affordability and accessibility. New modes, whether they're ride-hailing, scooters, or something else, are not universally accessible, and many require smartphones and bank accounts to access. CTA buses, meanwhile, are 100% accessible and can be accessed without a smartphone or a bank account. Ensuring a strong CTA bus system helps make sure that a key accessible transportation resource continues to be fast, frequent, and reliable with citywide geographic coverage. The task force also recommends fully funding the All Stations Accessibility Program that CTA has developed, our roadmap to making all of our rail stations vertically accessible within the next 20 years. The recommendations from the task force suggest accelerated funding, if possible, to support that goal. Just a couple of additional items in the executive summary of the report include some items that are applicable and will have an impact on CTA. They include the recommendation to establish a chief mobility officer within the mayor's office to help guide and coordinate transportation policy across the city. There's an explicit recommendation to raise the gasoline tax, both state and federal, to create a sustainable revenue stream for transportation investments. Another recommendation is to study alternatives to the gas tax as we, across the United States, move towards a more sustainable set of fuel sources. A recommendation also supports CTA's transition to a 100% electric bus fleet by 2040. And another recommendation supports investments in public transportation infrastructure overall to help preserve the existing system, to improve its efficiency and its capacity, and to expand its reach beyond current service areas. Also of note, it recommends modifying existing fees, taxes, and incentives to help align them with policy goals, such as discouraging single occupancy and empty trips, particularly ride-hailing. Overall, the report lays a very strong foundation for important actions that the city can take to advance the public interest as the mobility and transportation industry continues to evolve. Immediate next steps are covered in Section 6 of the report. Several of those involve CTA, and staff has continued to meet with the mayor's office team and others to advance these initiatives. CTA is the lead for promoting transit use by large corporations and institutions, something we're already undertaking as an initiative, and in evaluating what it will take to transition CTA to a fully electric bus fleet. We have a study underway right now. We're supporting other city agencies and departments on a host of other near and long-term activities, including data sharing arrangements, innovation zones, and automated vehicle piloting, as well as the scooter pilots that will probably be coming later this year. We're committed to continuing this important dialogue and making progress on actions that will support robust public transit as the base for the future of mobility and providing the greatest public benefit. Thank you. I'm glad to try to take questions.
Questions?
Yeah, I mean, just excellent recommendations, and this is probably more of a question for Dorval than for you, Mike, and that is, how are we going to pass this on to the new administration? I'm just looking at the recommendations. The one that kind of jumps out at me, all of this work, committee went through putting all of this together, the whole chief mobility officer. You know, someone who takes this, and I don't know, Dorval, if you're going to include it in our transition packet that goes to the new administration, but there needs to be a way to continue to highlight this and keep it before Mayor-elect Lightfoot, so her team is aware of it.
No, I agree, and I think a couple of places. One, we certainly are talking about it as part of our transition report material, but really CDOT, who has sort of the lead, it's a lead agency within city on the mobility task force, will also be incorporating this into their conversations with the mayor-elect as well. So they will definitely hear from all of us around this. And I should point out, even though Mike didn't mention it, you saw the list of people who are on the task force itself, but we also set up a secondary group of interested parties that included Uber, Lyft, the automated vehicle groups, the scooter groups, and others, and invited them in for a session where they could just talk to us about their issues and their concerns. The bottom line for the report and for the action under the task force was the recognition that the city as a whole has to sort of establish the policy foundation for how mobility is going to happen within the city. And the task force report is really sort of trying to create the roadmap for how to go about doing that. with the understanding, as is always the case, that the devil will be in the details, and how that sort of gets adjusted as we goes forward. I think that as a practical matter, I'm very pleased with the task force report on a number of grounds. One, the broad recognition that public transportation is sort of the foundation of the entire mobility conversation. And so whatever it is that the city does as a whole going forward, it has to look at how that integrates itself into an investment that the city has already put billions of dollars into, that ultimately drives the economic growth within the city itself. The other pieces of it that I think are important is the establishment of a chief mobility officer, so that there's a point person within the mayor's office that has the ability to really coordinate and work through the myriad of issues and stakeholders who are involved in a lot of these conversations at different levels. I have seen from other cities around the country that have pursued a similar approach to sort of developing their mobility strategy, and it was something that we needed to do here in Chicago, and I think that this is a really good foundation for that conversation, and there will be a lot more dialogue around all of these recommendations as we start to move forward with them.
I'm just curious, is there any place in the report where there's recommendations or room for private sector involvement in the mobility of the
Yes,
city?
certainly. And as Dorval mentioned, the intention is that the private sector will be involved at every step along the way, that many of these innovations and the technological improvements are going to come out of essentially a private sector initiative, in that they're interested in making money. I think the task force and the report itself helps to set sort of a public policy guideline for those actions. And so it's one thing to say these folks want to make money doing this. The other is the public policy side of it. What should the city of Chicago require when these people come in and they're going to be making money off of this? What will then contribute to the commonwealth? In other words, what will contribute to the public good?
And I guess-
that is incorporated.
My question goes more toward, because I get that component, but toward kind of the corporations that are coming in and just the corporate side and how they would be involved in it, not necessarily just to make money, but just for the efficiency of the city that they're very involved in.
Right. Obviously one of the individuals who was actually on the task force itself was from the commercial club of the city of Chicago that represent business interests around these issues. And certainly there was a lengthy discussion at a number of the sessions about the economic impact of our public transportation system. And in this case, I'm referring to all the modes, not just CTA, and how ultimately what needs to drive this process is providing an efficient and effective way to move people around the city that meets their needs and demands over a broad period of time. There was broad recognition that CTA is not going to serve every mobility need in the city, and that these other modes have to be complementary and supportive of it. There was also a lot of discussion about how you integrate all of this into an easy access system to allow people to make the best choices that meet their individual needs. A lot of the data sharing conversation was sort of focused on those types of topics, but clearly with an understanding that the city as a whole is stronger when we get these mobility options to work in concert as opposed to in chaos. And I think the business community certainly was a big part of that conversation.
That's good. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? President Card, I want to thank you for your leadership in this, and also especially on the accessibility and for pushing forward increased accessibility to the whole system. So thanks again.
You're welcome. I think Commissioner Tamley also was obviously very active in this as well, but clearly equity and accessibility were foundational points of the task force, and the recognition of the role that CTA in particular plays on that side of the house was viewed as critical to the ongoing success of transportation in the city.
I heard some good reports about your advocacy for accessibility, so thanks again. Mike, thank you very much. Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Your turn.
Excuse me, someone's phone keeps alerting out there, and we're hearing it, so could you just check your phone to make sure it's off and it's not on some kind of buzz thing or something? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to call to order the April 10th, 2019 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget.
Yes, absent today are Reverend Patterson, Reverend Miller, and Mr. Silva. Mr. Youngblood,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
Here.
Ms. Alvarez-Alias,
Here.
Chairman Irvine.
Here.
We do have a quorum of the committee with 4 members present.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of March 13th, 2019. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Youngblood,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Alias,
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
The minutes are approved with 4 yes votes.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the review of the finance report. Our presenter, Jeremy Fine.
Good morning, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and we'll be walking through the financial results for the month of February. To start with the revenues, we saw continued drag on the overall fare box line, primarily due to discretionary rides during the bad weather of February. Those were down about $600,000 for the month. However, passes continue to be a strong performer for us as people continue to migrate, even after a year of a fare increase. People continue to migrate to the 7-day, 30-day passes, as well as we continue to see progress on new pass as well. So that's about $800,000 to the positive for the month of February. So overall, net of those two lines, about $200,000 better than budget for fare and pass totals. For reduced fare subsidy, we're down, as we have been since 2015, about half of what we would expect from the state for that particular line item. So we see a negative variance of $1.2 million. That line in particular is very important for us to continue to offset the cost of the free and reduced fare ride program. So we continue to make it very well known to the folks downstate that again, getting all of our funding for that line is very critical for us as we move forward. Non-fare box totals are down $200,000 for the month of February, primarily due to non-capital grant revenues. So that puts us about $1.2 million down for the month of February, which again, just to highlight that is the amount of state subsidy that we were cut short for the reduced fare subsidy program. So that continues to be an issue that we need to see some progress on for downstate. Average fares up a penny, and then free rides are on par with where we saw for February of 2018. On a year-to-date revenue basis, we see fare box totals down about $3.2 million. That was again driven primarily due to the polar vortex in January. Passes are up $1.2 million, so net about $2 million down on a year-to-date basis for fare and pass totals. Reduced fare subsidy down about $2.4 million, again the month of January and February being cut in half, and non-fare box totals up about $400,000, which leaves us on a net basis year-to-date about $4 million below budget expectations for the month of January and February. Again, primarily driven by the effect of the polar vortex, coupled with the underfunding of the reduced fare subsidy from the state. So we see average fare up about 2 cents, and then free rides due to enforcement efforts down about $400,000 versus year-to-date numbers of 2018. With regard to expenses, we continue to move on belt tightening measures so that we see, trying to, again, claw back some of the shortfalls that we're seeing on the revenue side. But on labor, we see labor coming in essentially flat for the month of February, as well as material. The balances or the favorability that we see in fuel and power are due to the fact that particularly on the fuel line, we have a portion of our fuel expenditures that we buy on the spot market, and as fuel prices have dropped, we've benefited from that on that particular line. Security services are slightly favorable, but essentially flat, and that's primarily due to timing of invoices. Other expenses, we see some slight unfavorability, but overall, for the month of February, we see about $250,000 of favorability vis-a-vis the budget. That goes to offset a portion of the unfavorability on the revenue side. That was $1.2 million, so net for the month of February, revenues versus expenses were down about $1 million. That dovetails into the effects of the January results, where we saw, again, shortfalls on the state subsidy as well as the effects of the polar vortex. So we see, on a net basis, we have a positive favorability for expenses in total of about $150,000, netting out against the $4 million of negative favorability on the revenue line. So we're about $3.85 million unfavorable on a year-to-date basis for the months of January and February. So again, we will continue to make efforts to belt tighten as we continue through the rest of the year to offset the shortfalls that are created from the state subsidy as well as from the effects of the polar vortex in January. But again, that's where we stand as of a year-to-date basis. With regard to the three commodities, fuel, power, and natural gas, we are fully locked in for where we expect to be for 2019. We see that we still have some purchases for 2020, 2021, and 2022 for fuel and/or natural gas. We are continuing to track the market. There's a lot of variability in the market right now on both of those commodities, but we do estimate that there will be a downward trend in both of those. So we're waiting to make the future purchases, as prices continue to tick down. So we'll continue to keep the board apprised as to future purchases on those two commodities in particular.
Jeremy, how is
Yes.
March trending at this point?
So it's a little early to see the final numbers for March, but the weather in March, particularly versus last year, was a rougher March than we saw last year. So, we will continue to see some downward pressures, on our revenues, on our expenses, just because of the bad weather that we experienced through the month of March. But again, it's too early to tell definitively on that.
And you said that we were looking to close the gap sometime later in the year, well, for the 3.2 that we're short of. So what do you foresee that? Do you see that coming in the second or third quarter mostly?
Well, we'll continue to chip away at it month to month. We continue to have a great working relationship with the various departments here at CTA on belt tightening measures on all the various line items that we cover on a month-to-month basis. It's not abnormal for us to have some negative variance in the first couple of months of the year. So, again, we've been adept at being able to make the changes that are necessary to close those gaps, and we don't, have any reason to expect that we would be able to do the same this year. So again, we feel confident that we'll be able to close that gap as we move forward. But again, it's critical for us to continue to receive all of the state subsidies because again, 2.4 of that 3.8 is directly related to the state subsidy for reduced fare reimbursement.
Any other questions for Jeremy?
Not a question, but more of a statement. So Jeremy, I understand the reason to highlight it, but with the state's fiscal challenges, I just don't see us getting any relief in the FY20 budget. I mean, so we might as well multiply that 1.2 million shortfall times 12 and then figure out what we can control in terms of making that up. Because again, I just don't see with the challenges that the state's facing that we're going to get that back, at least in FY20. I understand putting it out there, continuing to remind them that it helps to offset the free rides. But at the end of the day, we've done this for a number of years now, sort of controlling what we can control. And what we can control is, guess what? That number's gonna be there. We continue to highlight it, every month, and I think, again, this is 3 or 4 years in a row where we've had to deal with this. One of the things that I didn't see, I know last year we were dealing with also some, policy changes or cuts at the federal level that was also impacting our budget. Did those go away? I don't see those reflected in this month's.
No, the sequestration cuts, are still in place because of the fact that we expected those to continue. We went ahead and baked those into the budget. And so that's why you don't see the variability. Last year, there was discussion at the federal level to end that sequestration haircut. So that's why we had taken it out. And then after we had set the budget, they come back and said, no, we're going to go ahead and extend those cuts.
Got it.
So we took a more conservative approach this year.
Good.
Any other questions for Jeremy? No? Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the review of agenda item number 4, which is an ordinance amending ordinance number 018-35. Jeremy.
I'll be joined by Michelle Curran, the Vice President of Budget and Capital Finance. The ordinance before you today is a request of a $150 million increase to the existing line of credit program. The program provides interim financing for projects funded in the 5-year capital improvement program, which is the largest capital project of RPM, as well as the largest rail car procurement. So the line of credit programs are a common tool used by many municipalities and other large transit agencies to fund projects prior to the issuance of long-term bonds. The line of credit allows interim financing for projects at a lower cost of funds than long-term bonds during construction because funds are drawn only as needed and at a lower interest rate than achieved via bonds. As we reach capacity on the line of credit, we expect to pay the outstanding draws with the issuance of long-term bonds. The existing line of credit will remain outstanding, and we will solicit bids from banks for the additional $150 million. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Jeremy?
Do you have an idea of what the savings would be? I know why we're doing it because, like you said, we only pay interest on the money once we draw it down. But have you kind of calculated out, because we know what projects in the queue, we pretty much have an idea of a timeline of the drawdowns. And I'm just curious, have we sort of looked at the return on our investment for doing it this way over the life of those projects that would draw down on this $300 million?
Yes, so there's two components that drive savings. One is the difference in interest rates that you're borrowing over the course of the year before you bond out, and that's about a 3% savings of the line, interest rate versus the bonds. And then the other benefit that you have with the line is that you only draw when needed. So those two factors coupled together create about $13.5 million of savings annually for a $300 million program. For almost the year that we've had the existing program outstanding, which has been at the $150 million level, those savings track that expectations. So we've seen that materialize.
So even with the line of credit that you mentioned, after that line of credit has been drawn down, you still have to do the bonds, right? Issuing the bonds.
That's correct. This is just aggregating up all of the invoices so that you have paid those over time and you're not sitting on the proceeds of $300 million bond transaction with the expectation to make those payments. You've actually made those payments. So your interest that you're paying on the bonds starts at essentially the same time that all of the dollars are at work in the capital project.
Mr. Chairman, I also just want to be perfectly clear that this line of credit can only be used for our capital program. It cannot be used for operating expenses, so it's very different than a line of credit that we took out a year or so ago where we had to actually cover a gap in our operating revenue. So this is purely for capital. It'll be used only on capital projects, and it will, obviously, the savings that we generate from it will obviously benefit us in terms of the operating side of our budget, but there will be nothing involved in this line of credit that would ever be used for operating expenses.
Thank you, Mr. President. And how does this situate us compared to other agencies?
So there are a number of local agencies as well as national transit agencies that have a outstanding line of credit. The city of Chicago has a $910 million line of credit. O'Hare Airport has a $600 million. Midway also has a line of credit. CPS does as well. And then, other transit agencies like New York, DC, and others, in Boston and LA also have short-term borrowing programs. So this is a common tool that folks use to provide essentially bridge financing for large capital projects, like we're undertaking here at CTA with the RPM project and the rail car procurement, as well as GTT projects and other improvements throughout the system.
You mentioned that we already have a line of credit with Bank of America.
Yes.
Are we looking at other banks outside of that as well to see what the comparable savings are as far as competition amongst the large banks?
Yes, the line of credit will be, we'll have a bid solicitation go out to, the banks that participate in this space. So it will be opened up much wider than just the current provider of Bank of America. And, the ultimate, when the bids come in, that will be presented to the chairman for verification, and then we'll report back to the board once the line of credit is executed.
Any other questions for Jeremy? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing a second amendment to a sublease to DGM Logistics LLC of a portion of property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. And our presenter is Bill Mooney.
Good morning. Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer.
Morning.
Real estate staff is recommending approval of an ordinance authorizing a second amendment to a sublease with DJM Logistics LLC for a portion of the property located at 120 North Racine. In August 2015, the Transit Board approved a 10-year lease with Sterling Racine LLC for approximately 85,000 square feet on the first and second floors of 120 Racine. Sterling Racine LLC has an approved sublease under Ordinance Number 18-70 and amended under Ordinance Number 19-12 for approximately 14,419 square feet to DJM Logistics LLC. The lessee is seeking consent to amend the sublease to increase the leased area by an additional 18,575 square feet and extend the sublease term to December 31st, 2022, with a one-year option to renew. Under the terms of the agreement, Sterling Racine, all subleases require authorization and approval of the Chicago Transit Board, which cannot reasonably be withheld. Sterling Racine LLC will continue to be responsible for all rent and expenses set forth in the lease agreement. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Bill? Thank you, Bill.
They're acquiring more space and paying more money, right?
Yeah, ultimately, one tenant's giving up some space, the other tenant's picking up the slack there. So we stay fully occupied in the building at this point.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Our final order of business today is the review of 10 purchase and sales award recommendations, and our first presenter is Alan McCormick. So first is contract numbers A1 and A2. Questions? Next is contract numbers B1 through B5.
So I've got a question on B2. Will this close out the Wilson Station project?
It's my understanding there'll be at least one more,
One more change order?
I believe so.
Yeah, we're expecting one more change order.
Okay, so, I'm not a big fan of change orders. And, you always have so many people that's focused on these projects, and that station's been open how long now?
A fair period of time, Chairman.
So are there punch list items, or what are these additional change orders that we're going to be looking at?
So ultimately, this change order resolves issues that occurred during construction, credits to contract for items withdrawn or items that were added to the construction process. It takes a while for that paperwork to process through. Most of them were executed under proceed orders, and it's just a collection of those that are now being approved and brought forward. The final change order deals with any outstanding claims that came up throughout the construction process that are currently being reviewed by the construction manager and our staff, as well as any other potential resolutions that may need to be resolved. It's the final change order that cleans up all the loose ends of the project.
So do you have an idea of the dollar? Because I'm looking, the total contract value here was 153 million. And with all of the change orders, we're now at about 151 million. And it looks as though change orders in terms of the total cost of the project is a little bit under 1.5%. You know how much we're looking at in terms of the next round of change orders?
I don't have a final number on that item. I can get back to you with some details on it as we come to it. But we're well within kind of the boundary. About 3% of change orders is a really healthy rate kind of for a contract of this size. So,
You know what board meeting we're going to see that?
we're hoping to wrap it up in the near future, so in the next 3 to 4 months to bring this to conclusion.
I just have a question about B5. How old are the boilers we're replacing at North Park, Bus Garage, and Beverly Garage in the shop? 'Cause I know last time we replaced boilers, they were pre-World War II.
Yeah, so the boilers are of a very valuable vintage. We got our money's worth out of them. So the North Park Maintenance Garage boiler is from 1949, and the Beverly Garage one is from 1900.
Did you say 1900?
Yes, I said 1900. They built them to last.
Well done.
And one of the great gains on the system is we get a mass jump in efficiency of the units. So they'll be much more energy efficient, much more better products, and ultimately easier for us to maintain in the long term.
We can swing replacing that 119-year-old boiler. Thank you.
And we got our money's worth.
Next will be contract number C1. Just like, talk briefly about that.
I'm sorry?
Just like talk, if you could just talk briefly about that.
Oh, sure. Mike Wynn is here.
Good morning, Mike Gwynn, Director of Revenue and Fair System. So this is presented for your consideration as a change order with Cubic Transportation Systems in the amount of $6,190,081. The change order covers 6 key areas. $750,192 is for fair equipment purchases for the new Damon Green Line Station. $2,392,021 is for fair equipment purchases for the RPM Phase 1 project. $562,353 is for costs associated with removing and reinstalling fair equipment during station construction projects. $87,525 is for bus reader installation kits as we are bringing new buses on the property. $1,058,400 is for operation of the Ventra Service Center located on the second floor of 567 West Lake. And $1,339,590 is for the Ventra Marketing Program. The vast majority of this amount will be for a campaign around the relaunch of the Ventra app later this year. That includes the cost of media purchases as well as maintaining of operations through the rest of the year. Approval of the change order will allow Cubic to continue to operate the Ventra system and provide benefits and convenience to our customers, as well as provide the necessary fair equipment for our construction program. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, question for me, why are we purchasing the equipment so far in advance of the completion of the project? For example, the Damon Lake Station, I mean, that's going to be driven mostly by CDOT. I think it's going to be paid by TIF, and that project is probably 2-3 years down the road. Why are we going to spend $750,000 today?
We will not make the purchase until it makes the most sense. Part of the reason for why we're trying to bundle it is to get advantageous pricing. So if we bundle together the fair equipment in the larger package, the per unit cost is less. So we're able to save funds based on that bundling.
Okay, it would just be helpful to know what the savings are. I mean, because again, you've got the same thing with the red purple modernization project, a little bit over $2 million. And we know that's a 5-year project. And again, you take Damon and you take the red purple modernization, that's $3.2 million. as part of this change order for projects that are gonna come online 2 or 3 years down the road. So it would be interesting for the board to hear what are the savings that we're gonna realize over time by packaging all of that together at once.
Sure. It's,
Versus-
yeah, for a vending machine, for example, it's about a $15,000 savings if we buy them in bulk per unit as opposed to a smaller package. So if we bundle the Damon with RPM, it's about $250,000 total that we'll save for all the equipment. All this will be funded by the project, so we're really trying to lock in the ability to make the purchase, to give the project the certainty and to be able to make the purchase when it makes sense for them.
So if you lock in the price today, I mean, technology is always improving, you know, and I would assume when the Damon line comes online 4 or 5 years down the road, there will be something new. Is that cost on them, or is that gonna come back to a change order to the board?
If there's any kind of cost, either a savings or an increase, that would have to come back. We want to lock in. We don't anticipate any kind of real changes to the equipment. There haven't been many changes in the past 5 years since we
But for a
launched.
station in technology, you don't think there would be any change to technology 4 or 5 years down the road?
So this is for the ticket vending machines, which have been consistent, and we build them to last, and try to have as minimal, we're doing software enhancements, but the actual physical equipment doesn't change all that much.
So what about the software enhancement? Is that an additional cost?
That will be just rolled into general operations, and that'll be something that we apply across the whole board. We maintain a single software application, single approach for all the vending machines. So any kind of change that we would make for the benefit of the entire system would apply to all the machines, including these.
And Chairman, it's also helpful to have all of the equipment similar, so that when we do make upgrades, the upgrades are kind of universal and they look and feel the same for the customers. So again, making the purchases now, not only as a cost savings, but when we go to do upgrades, it's kind of a universal front as opposed to having kind of different, different models, so to speak, out there in the.
No, I think the only thing, Jeremy, for me is, again, we're buying equipment today. We're not gonna need it for 5 years. I'm assuming they're not gonna build it until it gets closer to us needing to have it installed. I don't know when they're gonna get money in hand. I just didn't wanna give them $750,000 next month. They get to bank it, get the float on it, get the interest on it, but yet they don't have to deliver the product for 5 years.
That will
That's-
absolutely not
That's
happen.
not the case.
Exactly. I mean,
Right.
that's-
So
and that's why I
we're,
was
we're,
saying, why is it in the change order if, so you're just saying it's only in the change order only because we're making a commitment to buy it, they know we're gonna buy it, but in terms of money exchanging hand, it doesn't change hand
Correct.
till we actually need to.
That's correct.
right, and I think even more importantly, we're locking in the price.
Yeah,
So that price will stay in place until we actually take action under the change order to actually purchase the equipment, which won't happen until we're close to opening up those stations and needing the equipment to use for that purpose.
so it's a little misleading in terms of a change order, because a change order to me is going back, taking a look at what we just did for Wilson. Work completed, and now we've gotta pay.
Yeah, it's a different concept
Yeah.
that we're
This is
talking
almost
about
like
here.
the fuel, where you're locking in prices for
Correct.
something future down
Yeah.
the road. So, we might want to talk about it a little bit differently, because I don't consider this as a change
Okay.
order as much as, again, we're locking in prices for future purchase or usage of a product versus, again, change order. I'm assuming work is done, we're getting ready, we're paying for it. So, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. There's no further questions on that. Next will be contract number G1. Any questions?
Going back to this, there was no further questions, but I did want to make a comment with regards to the contract that we just had, because I know we're improving or putting in funds for customer service center that's here, and the marketing program as well, and just the comment, I think we talked a little bit about it yesterday, was with regards to, I know that we're limited on the hours that we have service here.
Actually, I'm taking a fresh look at that
Oh, you
issue.
are? Good.
Yes. I myself don't know why the hours are.
Okay.
the way they are, but I think you've raised a legitimate point with regards to our customers and making sure that our center is open and available when they can come to take advantage of it.
Yes.
And I've already asked staff to take a fresh look at that aspect of our operations and see if there are adjustments that we can make and should make to expand the hours
Good.
of our service.
Good. So that portion of it, that's great, looking at the hours. And then also looking at whatever we can do with our website or interaction on the internet so that it also gives more access to people that way, to our customers that way, so that they're able to have more access to service. So that was my comment, more than a question, but thank you. I'm glad we're looking into that.
Yep, I hadn't heard the comment about the website, but I will follow up and talk to you directly to get additional information, and we'll follow up on that as well.
Okay, great. Just anything we can do to expand.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Great, thank you. That was it.
Finally, will be contract number H1. Any questions?
Yeah, just like, just talk a little bit about it. I see we're changing agencies that we work with. The previous contract was 20 million. This one is 14 million.
So this one is we're only asking for 14 million, that's for the first 2 years.
Okay.
The second two are unfunded, so we'll have to come back and ask for funding for those option years.
Okay, because the first 20 million was, I'm just taking a look, it was from 2013 to 2019.
So this will be 28 million presumably by the time we come back and ask you for all of the funding.
All right.
So we looked at, as you can see, it's an IFB.
Yep.
So we had two of the contractors were non-responsive. One they failed to meet the DBE goal. And the next one, we asked them to give us references for similarly sized contracts. And they were unable to give contracts that were anywhere near the size of what we need. Additionally, because they were the lowest bidder, we went out, and Ron can speak more to that. We looked at the facilities, and we determined that they did not meet the scope that we need in order to supply the needs that we have.
Yeah, no, again, just looking at the numbers, anytime Jeremy comes before you and talk about budget issues, then I start looking at numbers in terms of spending going forward. And again, I'm just looking at the previous contract from 2013 to 2019. We spent about 20 million for security services, and we're spending 14 million in 2 years, and you're telling me that if we come back for the next 2 years, it's about 28 million. So I'm going to spend 28 million for 4 years, and it looks like under the current contract, I spent 20 million for almost 5 or 6 years. So I'm trying to figure out, that's a pretty huge increase. So again,
Ronald Esther, Acting Chief of Safety and Security. Much of that increase is due to the increased BOMA rate for health and benefits for the guards and supervisors.
We didn't have that in the prior contract, and in this contract, we added those provisions. So they have to provide them with health, they provide them with various things for pension and so forth. There's various payments they have to make now, which they didn't under the previous contract.
I'm just curious why they didn't have to do it under the previous contract, but, okay, I mean, I just want to get an explanation of why we're going to pay so much more for a shorter period
And then
of
there
time.
is the natural price increase over that
Yeah, I
period
would
of time.
expect a 3%, 2%, but this is more than 2 or 3%.
Right, it is
So
the
that's-
inclusion of the BOMA rates that had
Yeah.
a huge impact.
Yeah, okay.
What was that amount or that percentage?
I will be happy to get that for you. We can give you what the new rates are and the various payments they have to make.
Okay, and is that a new association or that was associated to it before, the BOMA?
The
I know
BOMA
the
rates-
group that I asked about
That's-
yesterday as well.
Those actually must be paid pursuant to city ordinance.
Okay,
So this contract will comply with that ordinance, which establishes these minimum rates and benefits for this type of work.
okay. So they were involved before and then this is just something?
I don't think we had it in the previous one.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't-
what I'm just.
I don't think the ordinance was in
Came into
effect
effect.
when we entered into our original contract. And so
Okay.
this is something that occurred and we were grandfathered in. And now that we're putting in place a new contract, we're required to comply with this requirement.
Yeah, I just think in the write-up, that would have been helpful, because I'm looking at the numbers, and it would have been helpful as I was doing,
If you had
reading
that
this, say,
information.
look, the reason there's such a huge increase in terms of pricing is due to, new ordinance that we're having to follow that takes into account healthcare, pension, and benefits, because I'm doing the math, 6 years versus 40 years, but yet I'm spending, double digits in terms of percentages more or shorter duration, but, okay, I
I
get it.
understand. We'll make sure we have that information and anything going forward, but we will get you all of that information and we will send it to you.
How long is this company that got the contract in place, this AGB?
AGB has 18 years of security services experience.
Any other questions?
You're a DBE vendor, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these 10 contracts on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Youngblood,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
That motion passed with 4 yes votes.
Thank you. And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
1 second. Tell me when you're ready to.
Good morning. I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled meeting of the Chicago Transit Board for April 10th, 2019. Would the secretary call the roll?
Yes, Directors Miller, Patterson, and Silver will not be here. Mr. Irvine. Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Here.
Mr. Youngblood.
Here.
Chairman Peterson.
Here.
We have a quorum of the board with 4 members present.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is public comment. It is my understanding, Greg, that there are no public speakers today.
That is correct, sir.
All right. The next order of business then is the president's report. President Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. It is not every day that our transit system gets mentioned by one of the world's largest and most beloved companies. But that is, in fact, what happened in late March when Apple announced to its customers that they will be able to tap their iPhone to pay a fare instead of using a physical Ventra card. It is an amenity that we have been working on for some time. In fact, it's probably something that I've been working on for about the past 2 years. And it leverages our popular Ventra mobile app as well. Mr. Chairman, you know, one of the things that we have always talked about is how do I make transit cool? And how do I appeal to millennials in terms of why transit should be a benefit to them? Well, I can't think of any better way of doing that than getting one of the companies that probably defines coolness to engage in working with us to establish a virtual Ventra card. So we're very excited about the opportunity to present this to our customers. We contemplate the rollout of the virtual Ventra card to happen later this year. And I'd like to ask Mike Gwynn, our Director of Revenue and Fare Systems, to come up and just give you a little bit more about the great news that we received from Apple late last month. Mike?
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning.
So as President Carter mentioned, CTA was very happy to have been featured on stage at Apple's special event at the end of March. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, announced that later this year, customers will be able to add their Ventra card to their Apple Wallet, allowing them to tap their iPhone or Apple Watch to pay a fare. Your Ventra card on the iPhone will support all the great benefits of Ventra cards, such as the ability to load and manage passes, as well as commuter benefits.
Apple Pay has also made riding transit easier and more convenient than ever before. Every day, millions of customers in these cities use their iPhone or their Apple Watch to go quickly through turnstiles and get on their way. And I'm excited to tell you that we're bringing Apple Pay to transit in major cities in the U.S., starting right here on the west coast of Portland and rolling out in Chicago and New York City later this year.
That was pretty cool.
And you will notice, of course, that it was our card that was featured on the iPhone.
So although customers can currently use a credit card in their mobile wallet to pay a single fare, the Ventra card on iPhone will function just like a physical Ventra card, meaning you'll be able to, as I mentioned, load your passes and transit benefit value and manage your account via the Ventra app. So our customers have long been awaiting this functionality and letting us know about it. And the CTA is very excited to be at the forefront of this innovation for our riders. The public response was overwhelmingly positive, and I've just got a handful of Twitter reactions there. While the announcement in and of itself was great, the excitement surrounding the launch in Chicago was increased exponentially by the role that Ventra played in the announcement. That's such a great picture there of Mr. Cook in front of our Ventra card. Twitter being Twitter, there were many more that we can't display at a family board meeting. But the reaction was nearly universally positive. As Mayor Emanuel and President Carter said in their joint statement, when one of the world's most inventive cities teams up with one of the world's most innovative companies, great things happen. And we are very thrilled to be bringing this feature to our customers later this year. Thank you.
Do you have a time frame around when it would happen? And I was just thinking about some of the bus shelters. Is there going to be advertising?
There's going to be major advertising around this. Apple is really driving the marketing effort behind it, and I've pretty much told the Apple team that just tell us what you want to do and we'll do it. So as they start to put that together, there'll be a lot more discussion about what that will look like. But You know, this is an area where I'm not going to try to interject my thoughts over theirs in terms of how to best market this new product. I would also point out to you that, as you know, or may not know, but I'll tell you, Apple is one of the more secretive companies in terms of their products and announcing them. And I was under extremely strict orders to not disclose to anyone that we were working on this. And I indicated to you that I've been working on this, or I should say Mike and I have been working on this for over 2 years. No one, not even Terry, not even the mayor, were ever aware of the fact that we were doing this until we got the word that we could let people know literally, I think, the eve of the announcement. So we kept up our end of the bargain, and as a result of that, we're one of the first transit systems in the country to have this new product, and I think that it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to promote CTA and really just ride the coattails of Apple and the Apple machinery to support that. With regards to your question, we hope to launch it later this year. I'm really pressing to get it done by this summer, but I recognize that there's still some work to be done on this, and we'll get back to you with a more definitive date as soon as we lock that in.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, all the summer activities for Lollapalooza,
You and I are
having
thinking
for all
alike.
of the young people who normally come into the city for a lot of events would be just great. So, okay.
Yes, you and I are on the same page. I very much want to take advantage of the summer season to market this.
I just have a practical question. So when it's on your iPhone and Apple Pay, you can still have the card, and so like if your phone dies, you can still use the card?
If you can provision a new card to your phone and then just manage it if you want to maintain your physical card. But if you transfer the balance and digitize your physical card, then the physical card will no longer be operative. And it's just that's a fraud prevention more than anything. For people who have passes, we only want one card associated.
Just make sure you don't completely drain your phone if you're at Lollapalooza, otherwise you're stuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next order of business today is the approval of the March 13th, 2019 board minutes. The minutes were previously distributed. Any comments? Hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of March 13th, 2019.
So move.
Second?
Moved in second. Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Alias?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
The minutes are approved with 4 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. We will now take up executive session. It is my understanding that there will be executive session this morning, Karen?
Yes, Chairman, we will have executive session pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C, subparagraphs 1, 2, and 8 of the Open Meetings Act.
Thank you, Karen. I now entertain a motion to recess into executive session.
So
So
moved.
moved. I'll second.
Second. Ms. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Alias?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes.
May I now have a motion to return to the open meeting of the Transit Board?
Second.
Second, Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarado Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business, our board agenda items 5A and 5B, both discussed in executive session. Karen?
Thank you. In executive session, the board was presented with the tentative agreements for the Teamsters and for the Roadmasters. The Law Department recommends approval of these agreements. The first agreement with Teamsters Local 700 is for the time period of January 1st, 2017 through December 31st of 2021. Pursuant to those terms, the positions will continue to receive the prevailing wage rates. Premiums will be offered which are lower than outside rates for those operating heavy equipment and cranes, but those personnel must be certified to do those positions. The union will relinquish its exclusive right to drive CTA vans used in the Cook County SWAP program for a one-time payment of $2,000 to each union member on payroll. Personnel that are hired to drive vehicles that do not require a commercial driver's license will be paid at 73% of the Class 1 rate, which is the lowest rate. And finally, for health care, it will be the same plan design as under the ATU contract, which has the annual premium increase formula, which allows CTA to control the rising cost of health care. The terms of the second tentative agreement are with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, the Roadmasters. The term of this agreement is January 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2021. Wages will be adjusted at the same rates negotiated with ATU through 2019, with 1% increases thereafter, unless under the ATU contract the wage rate is more. CTA will discontinue the uniform laundry service that it supplies and provide a voucher of $700 in 2019 and $400 per year thereafter, capped at $1,000 for those employees who are required to wear fire-resistant clothing. And again, the health care terms that were negotiated are the same as with ATU, with the same premium increase formula. The Law Department recommends approval of both of these tentative agreements.
Thanks, Karen. I'll now entertain a motion to approve Board Agenda Item 5A, an ordinance authorizing execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Teamster Local 700.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarado Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. I now entertain a motion to approve Board Agenda Item 5B, an ordinance authorizing a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers 134, Roadmasters.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarado Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is Board Item Number 5C. Karen?
This board item was for the board to review the findings and recommendation of a Section 28 panel that was convened pursuant to board ordinance, prior board ordinance, to hear the evidence concerning the discharge of Kermit Collins on September 21st, 2018 for conduct which is detrimental to CTA. The hearing committee, after conducting a hearing, recommended that Mr. Collins' discharge should be sustained.
Thanks, Karen. I now entertain a motion to approve an ordinance sustaining the discharge of Kermit E. Collins.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarado Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a report from the Committee of Strategic Planning and Service Delivery, Director Irvine.
Thank you. The Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery met earlier this morning. The committee heard and reviewed 2 presentations, one on the Halsted Street Bus and Bike Lane Pilot Report and on the City of Chicago New Transportation and Mobility Task Force Report. That concludes my report, Chairman Peterson.
Thanks, Director Irvine. The next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget, Director Irvine.
Thank you. The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this morning. The committee approved the March 2019 minutes and reviewed the finance report. The committee also approved the following two ordinances. An ordinance amending ordinance number 018-35, authorizing and modifying a short-term borrowing program for capital purposes secured by sales tax receipts and/or certain IGA revenues, authorizing the issuance from time to time of obligations secured by such revenues in an aggregate principal amount outstanding at any one time, not in excess of $300 million, pursuant to such short-term borrowing program, and authorizing the execution and delivery of one or more supplemental indentures under which obligations are issued, and an ordinance authorizing a second amendment to a sublease to DJM Logistics LLC of a portion of property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. The committee also approved all 10 purchase and sales award recommendations. The committee placed both ordinances and the 10 contract award recommendations on the omnibus and recommended the omnibus for board approval. That concludes my report, Chair.
Thank you, Director Irvine. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Irvine?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a construction report. Bill?
Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer, and joining me today are
Juan Pablo Prieto, Senior Manager, Diversity Programs.
Chris Puchel, RPM Chief.
So the first project I'd like to provide an update on is our East Lake, Milwaukee, Illinois substation upgrade. As I've been reporting in previous months, the project has shifted away from Milwaukee and Illinois, which are substantially complete at this point, and the focus has shifted towards East Lake. At this point, with East Lake, we are moving towards the equipment installation phase, where we're finalizing manufacturing and testing of that equipment, and some of the site remediation and preparation for the install of that equipment. The first picture here shows you the courtyard and demolition of the vaulted sidewalks in that courtyard. There's a series of cable duct banks that come out from the substation that facilitate, it's a joint facility that we share with ComEd, and so there's ComEd lines that come in and out, as well as our feeds for our traction power system in the loop in the subways. And so as part of this project, we'll be remediating this area and reinforcing that courtyard. And the second picture gives you some evidence of the 8 new AC lines. As we have talked about with the other substations, we'll be bringing in brand new feeds from Commonwealth Edison that will ultimately be the power feeds that we will use to convert for our DC system. And so this is some of the installation for those massive kind of traction power line, feeds from ComEd. The next project is a new one that I'm bringing forward to you. Approximately a year ago, the board approved a contract with Kiewit Aldridge for the reinstallation or new installation of our 30-year-old signal system that goes from Jefferson Park to O'Hare. This is a design-build signal contract. The better part of the last year has been focused mostly on design activities, and we are now starting to come into the construction phase, and I felt it was worth bringing forward and giving you some insights on the activities that have been going on. It's a very complicated job that will have a series of line cuts over the next year, facilitating cutovers of this new signal system and its installation. The signal system is a very safety-sensitive system, requires a great majority of that work to occur when there is no train service going on to make sure we protect our customers. So during these line cuts, we'll be providing bus service over weekends. So some of the activities that have been going on in the field to date have been manhole investigations, some duct bank work. So we have some existing manholes and other right-of-way assets. So here's a picture of some potholing on the right-of-way where they're digging small holes to identify underground assets so they can properly path them in the design drawings and prepare for further construction. Here's an example of one of the manholes. So we've been going into all the existing signal manholes, trying to identify what's flooded, what's not flooded, what duct banks are still viable, what cables may have been not shown on as-built over the years, as well as changing out some of those cables, pulling out old cables. And then they've been doing some temporary installations to prepare for the cutovers and full installations of the system, clearing out some of the original equipment, moving it to the side to make way for new equipment that's coming in. This is a $153 million project, and it currently is on time and on schedule. The next project is our 95th Terminal Improvement Project, which has been in the punch phase, with most of the activities focused in the south terminal now on the reconfiguration of the existing stairwell and the installation of the escalator for that terminal. Here's a picture of the new stairwell in its place in its final configuration. And the most exciting activities as of late was Mayor Emanuel, Chairman Peterson, President Carter joined Theaster Gates for the unveiling of his two pieces that were commissioned as part of the project. The first one you see in the background of this picture was titled America, America. It is a signature Theaster piece. These are reused fire hoses. He's woven into tapestries, and there's one on kind of each side of this period. It's a really significant piece and one that really is what he's known well around the world for. And the other piece is a little more interesting, and it's an extended song of our people is the title of the piece. And Theaster talked about it at the event, how he had a listening tour with the community and got feedback about what they wanted to see and all that, and he couldn't figure out a way to make that work in a mural. And so one of the other kind of signature pieces of Mr. Gates' work is this living art. And so what he's installed at 95th is a radio studio. And as you can see here, the mayor and Theaster and President Carter and Chairman are spinning the first discs of that studio, as he will be programming radio programming over the next 5 years as part of his work. Is a really interesting, unique piece. It was very exciting, I think, for everybody involved. I'm not sure who picked the record. Maybe you guys have better insight on that one, but you know. So.
Can I?
Well, Theaster picked the first record, but we did say we wanted some Chicago local talent, Jerry Butler, Curtis Mayfield, Mavis Staples.
No, I think Terry and I were both sort of throwing in our own sort of thoughts about the music agenda, but I also want to mention a couple other things about Theaster Gates. Many of you probably know Theaster as an internationally renowned artist who is, one of the best in his field. But many of you may not know the fact that Theaster used to be a CTA employee. He worked in our planning office, and his cubicle mate was Bill Mooney back when they started. And so Theaster has, I think, a real soft spot for CTA in terms of the work that he did for us, and I think we're certainly the strong beneficiaries of his creativity in a way that I don't think many of us could have ever imagined. And I do believe that we may be the only CTA station in the entire world that has a radio station built into the terminal itself. So we have a very unique position with the work that he did here. We're certainly looking forward to the programming that he's going to be pursuing at the station as we move forward. I should point out that the music that plays through the station now can be heard throughout the entire terminal, both the north and the south terminal, and that there are plans to eventually have it broadcast over the internet. So this will really be a community piece that the community will be able to enjoy and participate in way beyond the footprint of CTA station itself, which certainly feeds in to my vision of our stations being more than just transportation hubs, but really being community centers that basically connect with and support the communities that we serve.
The last project I'll be providing an update on today is our Belmont and Jefferson Park Station Improvement Project. Most noteworthy is the activities over the last couple of months have really focused on bus turnaround activities. And at Belmont, we cut a few weeks ago the ribbon on the new canopy there. This is a significant architectural piece that is part of the major footprint of the community. And where in Garfield we brought art into the architecture, here the architecture is the art of the station. Here's the station entrance, the revitalized station entrance underneath that canopy. Here's a picture of the canopy itself. It is a truly stunning piece. If you haven't had a chance to see it in person, you come upon it, it really takes you. And President Carter and I had some conversations. The more you kind of ponder upon it, the more taken by it you are. Carol Ross Barney, the architect, talked about how part of her inspiration for the piece was a local park that she visited when she was a child, and how they had a waterfall, and this kind of her image of a waterfall in that space. We had a wonderful day for that event, and it was predicted rain, but we ended up with gorgeous sunshine and the translucent blue and the shadows it throws. It just it was really interesting watching the people come up to the station now that it was open, and just how many of them were smiling and energized by the canopy itself. It was, it was really really exciting and fun. So, and here's another perspective of the canopy. And then on the other side of the Blue Line at Jefferson Park, we continue restoration of the north terminal for that reconstruction, in which we'll be doing a phase change in the upcoming weeks, where they will finish construction of that side of the terminal, and we'll be shifting to the reconstruction of the south terminal there. And here you can see them pouring in the concrete terminal, as well as the canopy there in the background.
Work continues on the RPM advance contracts. In particular, we've reached substantial completion on both of the property demolition, so we have really wrapped up that effort. The work on the advanced utilities continues aggressively into the construction season. We recently had a closure in the neighborhood of the RPB section, the bypass section. We had a closure on Clark Street that lasted approximately a month. That was AT&T doing work on behalf of the CTA. That work was completed on time and on budget. The road was opened up for the Cub seasons. No issues with that. So on the northern end of the project, in the section between Lawrence and Bryn Mawr, we have miscellaneous crews out there, most of them working for ComEd. Installing duct bank in the alleys adjacent our right-of-way. Again, moving things that ultimately will be in conflict with future structure that we intend to install in the project. The footprint in that area is increasing significantly. We're working very closely with the aldermen and community groups to minimize impact associated with that work. It is predominantly being done by, as I said, ComEd and their subcontractors. Some of the ComEd forces in areas where we've completed the duct bank are starting to pull cables through and otherwise kind of actualize and finish that work, but generally speaking, we're still installing the duct bank into which some of the higher distribution lines will go in the future. Advancing, if you could keep going on the slides. This is some of the substantially complete demolition work that I referenced earlier. Keep going. Broadway substation. Similarly, this project to some of the ones that Bill's talked about continues. We're really in the phase of completing the building renovations there and starting to install the utility grade traction power equipment. So here you see some of the DC side of that gear. You saw with Bill the AC feed. That's the power coming from ComEd. This is once we transform it into DC power, which is what we use for traction power. This is the DC side of that gear, and that work continues on budget and tight to schedule, but with no real planned or anticipated impact on the larger RPM project to follow. Keep going, please. So similar to the Dan Ryan project, where we did substantial work, we had an aggressive alternative service plan on that project that involved the Green Line. And to prepare the Green Line for that alternative service, we did substantial work on it so that it wouldn't no slow zones or other issues would inconvenience our customers during that alternative service. Similar to that concept on RPM, we're also doing a piece of track work in the area of Addison. We have 4 tracks in that area. This is on the western 2 tracks. So if we can keep turning. It's a quick project. You won't see it very long in your report here. We have started it and are substantially complete already. It's a $4 million piece of work. So we went in and rebuilt the concrete track in this area and started it in April with the contractor. We led it earlier in the year, or late last year rather. Came in and had some impacts in this area to our customers, to the community. We worked through those issues and installed the new concrete and have now reopened it again in time for the Cub seasons. No issues there. Nice piece of work, will benefit our customers now and will benefit our customers when we're running trains in alternative configurations in the future for RPM. And that concludes our report.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Bill, Juan, or Chris? All right, thank you. Greg, is there any new business to come before the board?
No, but if you would permit me to follow up on Dorval's comments about the Astor.
Yeah.
The key to getting him in here, Terry, was your ex-coworker at planning, Marcel Acosta.
Oh,
Marcel, who had built Mike Conley's job in those days.
Okay.
Found the Astor either in San Francisco or Seattle at some he didn't find him, but he ran into him. Comes back, and of course, then he had to sell Theaster to Valerie Jarrett.
Okay.
And so he brings Theaster into the office, and he introduces Theaster to Valerie, and they have an interview. And the interview goes on for a while, and finally then Theaster leaves, and he leaves, and Marcel was in with me. And Valerie walks in, and we say, well, what do you think? And she goes, well, he's really smart, I really like him, but why did he wear an earring to the interview with me? Which, knowing Miss Jarrett, it was sort of like, why did he have an earring on?
I can see
This is
that.
20-some years ago. It's not right now.
Exactly. He was ahead of his time.
And
'cause-
Marcel says, Valerie, he's an artist. She goes,
Exactly.
You're right, he's an artist.
He's
So that was the first interview because he knew he had to sell him to Valerie.
Right.
It worked.
Yeah,
There was no other new business.
the Esther Gates fan. I mean, he is just really a brilliant guy. Thanks. With no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.